Thanks, brothers and sisters. I'm very proud to be here as the only national trade union supporting this campaign wholeheartedly. I'm proud of the democratic mandate that I've got for what I'm going to say now. CYW came into Unite, the new union, because we recognised in 2003 that the storm winds were going to blow. We didn't realise then how icy and cold and hard the winds were going to blow with that financial crisis caused by the finance capitalists. So we formed the community and youth workers and not-for-profit sector of Unite. That's the industrial sector within the union, and we represent all grades, and we specialise in our bit of that sector in defending youth, community and play work. And we inherit what has been 123 years of completely unauthorised space for workers to get together and to fight for their values, the definition of their work and the services that it provides. The first trade union for youth workers was formed 3 miles from this building in 1886, the Manchester Girls Club Workers Union. It didn't last very long, but the workers, the women workers then in the voluntary sector who formed it, went on to form a whole range of voluntary organisations and professional organisations to begin to develop this thing called youth work. Now, thinking of the contribution that sisters have made to the union over the years, I think today we should first of all start off by saying a big thank you to our sisters, mainly sisters in Coventry, who have now taken part in the longest ever industrial action to save youth work values as expressed in their contracts and employment and their job descriptions, and to save funding for essential youth and community services. So that struggle goes on. It goes on with a legacy of failed professional associations. The Club Leaders Association, National Association of Youth Leaders and Organisers, National Association of Local Authority Youth Leaders, Society of Neighbourhood Workers, Youth Service Association, Community and Youth Service Association, Essex Wardens Association, Association of Community Workers, Scottish Association of Community Education Staff, Northern Ireland Youth Workers Association, WAFTQ, Welsh Association of Full-Time Youth and Community Workers, Community Education Association, Youth Workers Association, which I used to go to try and meet, and the meetings were often held in the back of a Reliant Robin. Those associations in the past said we need something stronger. We need something that's going to have status for the workers, which the workers can control democratically to ensure that there are vibrant services for young people. And they eventually became the CYW section now of Unite. Associations are defined in the negative. They're not this, they're not that. The best they can be is unincorporated charities. So we're clear as a union that it's the unions, and it's this campaign, and all credit to those who put it together, that is going to do the business in this new storm. Lighting a candle of a professional association in this environment will be like lighting a candle in the middle of Dartmoor in a hurricane. It won't work. The unions are recognised by the employers, the government, and all other relevant bodies to have a voice for the field. A new association could be like many of those neoliberal bodies that keep popping up without accountability and so loose that they don't take us any further forward. A union doesn't have limits to what it can achieve. Now, the byline for this section is wrong. It says there's constant talk of savage cuts. There's not. I don't wear my long johns in winter anymore. I put my mobile phone in the pocket because it gets so hot every day now with talk of severe cuts in public sector services generally, and specifically and in a targeted way on youth work and youth services. The Coventry struggle, which I've mentioned, is part of a £74 million cut in Coventry City Council over the next 2 years. The Birmingham cut of 2.6 million to integrated youth support services, 1.2 million off of the statutory youth service, 600,000 off of grant aid to the voluntary sector, is part of a 69 million cut, 2,000 jobs, next year. West Sussex, 2 million cut to the youth service. Leicester, get rid of all their school-based youth work. And the leader of Leicester Council, a Tory, making it absolutely clear what the Tory strategy, agreed by those in power in local government, is. He says youth work doesn't matter in the current climate. And so on, all around the country, with many of our brothers and sisters here today, Staffordshire, Gloucester, all over the place, up against a blitzkrieg of public services, particularly targeted on those services that benefit young people. Add it all up and see the picture. That's where they're dedicating their acts at the moment. Now, in that overwhelming situation, we can win. And I commend to you the story of the brothers and sisters in Oxfordshire who faced a 2.3 million cut to the youth service, 70% of its budget. Instant reaction by the branch, public and press campaign, the cut reversed. But that is not going to be the story all over unless we are stronger and more united. It says in this session also that the unions are about defending jobs and services. Of course we are, and that struggle is going to be at the cutting edge of the struggle for youth work. But we do much more in bringing together that whole history of workers who fought for the professional status of youth work as an identifiable, beneficial thing in society. We inherited from them into our constitution the phrase that says that we as a union have to submit to continuous and critical analysis the ideas and practices of community and youth work as expressed in the curricula of full-time and part-time training courses and the real face-to-face methods adopted by those in these areas of work. Now, another new feature of this situation is that as a union we have had to defend against the most appalling victimisation and intimidation and bullying of youth workers that I've seen in 33 years of representing youth workers. Victimisation of members who've stood up for youth work practice, as expressed in the document that we've just agreed, the statement for this campaign. There are some in this room who've lost their jobs or who the unions defended against absolutely unbelievable victimisation for doing nothing other than standing up for youth work practice and the value base that we are based on. We need a union tougher than ever to fight that level of victimisation. Now, how many in this room, youth workers practising, sign timesheets? Hands up. Quite a good majority. The first struggle I was involved in with Tony was against the introduction of timesheets in Derbyshire, 1988. Prior to that time, it was unthinkable that youth workers would account through an intrusive management system for every half hour of their time. It was the autonomy of the worker that made us deploy our time in the interests of young people. We're letting it slip at levels of contract and job description and everyday working practice, whereby they are taking over control of us. We've got to turn the tide and start taking control ourselves, and we have a number of papers and a couple of suggestions as a union which we put to you and commend to you as ways of taking control back ourselves. Now, in doing that, we've got to take some bearings. If we have a campaign, if we have a union, we've got to know who our friends and enemies are. We can be loose cannons, but loose cannons floating around on the ship can misfire or they can fire accidentally at each other. We've got to have some focus. So who are the enemies? Education Inspections Act was the source of the current round of problems. That was the act that said that all services to children and young people have got to be commissioned out. They've got to be thrown out onto the market. That bit of legislation followed a commissioned out research report from an accountancy firm called PricewaterhouseCoopers that said to the government, the market, that's the quote, the market for children and young people's services is worth $6 billion a year. The best way of dealing with it is to farm it out and privatise it. The first hit after that was Northamptonshire. All youth workers redundant. Commission out the service. And there are literally scores of services now where they are putting our work out to the market. And that is one of the biggest threats, because of the market, the private companies currently eyeing up services to children and young people don't want our value base. They don't want our terms and conditions, and they don't want critically reflective practitioners. Third big enemy, integrated youth support services. We had assurances at the time from the ministers that this would not mean the disintegration of services, and more importantly, it would not mean the melting down and the disintegration of professional specialisms. But that's exactly what's happening. And the main mechanism for delivering a new workforce to work in a bland, neutered casework kind of way with children and young people is the Children's Workforce Development Council, which was putting proposals forward last week, which we think we've just about countered. But in essence, their proposals are that there should be a generic service based on a generic qualification for all those working with children and young people, regardless of specialism and the different value bases that underpin different forms of intervention. The employers, obviously, in local government Tory controlled, are big enemies. Gunning for the main terms and conditions for youth workers, and we've held them off in some places and we've got current difficulties in others. So who are the friends? National Youth Agency, I would argue, is half a friend. It used to be a bit more than that, it's half a friend now. The bit of the National Youth Agency which is a good friend is the Education and Training Standards Committee, which through a peer-led system has recently revised the endorsement guidelines for training courses which express our values. But it's the MYA that's got rid of the audit of youth work they used to do annually. It's the MYA that's got rid of some of its youth work specialists, and it's the MYA that's got rid of all, I think, except one from its national board, people with youth work experience. And above all, it's done away with Youth Work Week. And the motion that we're putting to this conference is that we should reclaim that as a field. We should create the space as youth workers to celebrate the importance of our practice on our terms, with no guiding notes from a National Youth Agency or anyone else, but as youth workers claim at a period which we can define the work that we do in all of its benefits. Who are the friends? Lifelong Learning UK. A big struggle there to define the youth work competencies. Have a look at them. They express the importance of the voluntary relationship with young people and, by and large, the progressive agenda that we have at this conference. The work that Janet and others did at the QCA sounds all bureaucratic, this, but it's dead important because it underpins the value base and the definition of youth work. Qualifications Curriculum Authority, through its benchmarks, has defined youth and community work in higher education. And yes, the JNC, the Joint Negotiating Committee for Youth and Community Workers, not just about terms and conditions, but an expression of the progressive values of youth work. We hope that the union is a main friend in this, and we hope that this campaign and the union will work ever closer together. So 5 things to think of very quickly, Tony, for the conference to take forward. Youth work has never been as vulnerable as it is now. Part of the vulnerability is that anyone can call themselves a youth worker, and some criminals have. There is no restraint or regulation on how a youth worker is defined and seen by society. To say that we haven't got to deal with that through some form of protection or from some self-defined code of ethics and licence is not helpful to us in these circumstances. I think that we've got to do another Warwickshire. The big battle against the Tories the last time round when they were cutting the service to pieces was when they tried to get rid of it completely in Warwickshire. I think there needs to be some trust in the field that the union will identify a key struggle where all of the strands of the attack on youth work come together and we mobilise in defence of that. It might be the 40 workers in Coventry, it might be a service which very soon is threatened with complete extinction. But I think we should say to the union, call the day, and we'll have the biggest ever national demonstration of youth workers. We are role models for young people. Young people still just about, despite the scale of unemployment, go into the world of work. The role models for young people going into work must be more unionised than they have been before. So join the union. And finally, refresh our theory of emancipatory practice. Have a look at Marx, have a look at Freire, have a look at Gramsci, Allman, McLaren, Giraud and the others. Because none of us came in to this work to rescue and reform and tinker at the edges. As Freire said, you cannot just throw yourself into simple verbal denunciations of social injustice. As Marx said, you have to change the world.